That wolf is drowning, Clara Bennett cried, dropping her basket of herbs before anyone could stop her. The enormous white wolf vanished beneath the glittering surface of Blackwood Lake, leaving only widening circles where its silver-white head had been. Clara kicked off her shoes, gathered her pale blue skirt, and plunged into the cold water. She had no idea that the animal belonged to the Alpha King, or that everyone in the kingdom believed it was too dangerous to touch. She only knew that something needed her help. The water reached her shoulders as she struggled toward the place where the wolf had disappeared. Then a powerful shape brushed against her legs. Clara gasped, reached beneath the surface, and caught a handful of thick fur. "I have you," she promised, although the wolf was nearly twice her size. Somehow, with the animal offering suspiciously little resistance, she guided it the final 20 feet to shore. Clara crawled onto the grass and pulled the motionless wolf beside her. Its eyes were closed, its paws were limp, and water sparkled across its beautiful white coat. "Please wake up," she whispered. She cradled its massive head in her lap, rubbed its ears, and placed one gentle rescue kiss on its forehead. The wolf opened one amber eye. Before Clara could react, it lifted its head, licked her cheek, and began wagging its tail with enough enthusiasm to scatter droplets across the grass. "You are alive," Clara laughed, throwing both arms around its neck. A deep voice behind her answered, "Ghost can swim across a river 3 miles wide without resting." Clara slowly looked up. A tall man stood at the edge of the trees, dressed in a white royal shirt beneath a dark riding coat. His black hair was tousled by the breeze, but there was nothing careless about his commanding posture or ice-blue eyes. Every guard behind him had bowed. Clara's heart sank as she recognized Ethan Blackwood, the Alpha King. Ethan stared first at his famously untouchable wolf, then at the unknown Omega holding him as if he were an oversized household pet. "Your Majesty," Clara said, scrambling for an explanation. "I believed he was drowning. So did half my guards," Ethan replied, until they remembered that Ghost enjoys swimming more than hunting. Ghost immediately closed both eyes and collapsed back into Clara's lap. His tongue hung slightly from the side of his mouth in a performance so dramatic that even Ethan's stern expression almost broke. Clara looked from the supposedly helpless wolf to his unimpressed owner. "Are you telling me he pretended to drown?" Ethan stepped closer, studying the animal with growing suspicion. "I am telling you that he has never pretended to drown before." He gave a quiet command for Ghost to rise. The wolf remained completely still. Ethan repeated it with the authority that made an entire kingdom obey, but Ghost only pressed his head more firmly against Clara. She hesitantly touched one white ear. "Ghost!" The wolf sprang upright at once, perfectly healthy and shamelessly pleased with himself. Clara stared at him in disbelief. Ethan removed his coat and placed it around her trembling shoulders. His eyes lingered on the fading mark of the wolf's wet nose against her cheek. "It appears," he said, as Ghost positioned himself between them and wagged his tail, "that my wolf did not need rescuing. He needed an introduction." Clara had barely tightened Ethan's coat around her shoulders when Ghost seized the handle of her abandoned herb basket and started toward the forest path. "That belongs to me," she called. The white wolf glanced back, amber eyes bright with mischief, but continued walking as if stealing from an Omega beside the royal lake were perfectly respectable behavior. Clara hurried after him, only to stop when Ethan fell into step beside her. His guards followed at a discreet distance, wearing expressions that suggested none of them understood what had just happened. "Will he return my basket?" Clara asked. "Ghost usually returns what he takes," Ethan said. "Usually?" Eventually, Ghost carried the basket directly to a waiting royal carriage, placed it beside the door, and sat proudly. Clara stared at him. "He expects me to go with you. He appears to have planned the entire afternoon," Ethan replied. Clara could not decide whether the Alpha King sounded annoyed or impressed. She looked down at her soaked dress. "Your Majesty, I should return home. You were in cold water for several minutes because my wolf deceived you. The royal physician will examine you first." His tone held authority, but his next words were gentler. "That is concern, Miss Bennett, not punishment." Clara blinked when he used her name. One of the guards must have quietly identified her, yet Ethan spoke it as though he intended to remember it. She entered the carriage, and Ghost immediately climbed in beside her. When Ethan took the opposite seat, The wolf stretched across the floor and placed one paw on each of their boots. During the short journey to Blackwood Castle, Clara learned that Ghost had ignored every command to move. He only lifted his head when she spoke, then settled it on her knee with a contented sigh. Has he always been this stubborn? She asked. Only when he believes he is right. About what? Ethan's gaze rested on Ghost before returning to her. That is what concerns me. At the castle, royal physician Margaret Hayes examined Clara and declared that warm clothes and hot tea would be sufficient. Clara expected to be escorted home afterward, but Ghost vanished with her damp handkerchief. They found him in the great hall, sitting before Ethan's throne with the small square of fabric carefully placed between his paws. Ethan ordered him to return it. Ghost turned his head away. Clara stepped closer. Ghost, please give that back. He immediately picked it up and placed it in her hand. A murmur traveled among the servants. Ethan's expression grew still. He has never obeyed a stranger. Perhaps he feels guilty for frightening me. Ghost sneezed, which sounded suspiciously like disagreement. Clara tried to leave through the nearest doorway, but he rushed ahead and stretched his enormous body across it. She chose another exit. Ghost blocked that one too. This is becoming embarrassing, Ethan said. For which of us? Clara asked. To her surprise, warmth briefly softened his ice-blue eyes. For the king who has apparently lost control of his own wolf. Ethan approached Ghost and spoke in a quiet voice. The wolf finally rose, but instead of moving aside, he nudged Clara toward Ethan until her hand brushed the king's sleeve. Both of them froze. Ghost wagged his tail once, satisfied. Clara quickly stepped back. Ethan watched her with an unreadable expression, then glanced at the handkerchief she held. Before either could speak, Ghost trotted to the center of the hall, sat beside an untouched bowl of food, and refused to take a single bite. Margaret examined him and found nothing wrong. Yet when Clara knelt beside the bowl and softly said his name, Ghost began eating at once. Ethan looked from his suddenly obedient wolf to Clara, and she understood that her rescue had created a problem neither of them could dismiss. Miss Bennet, he said slowly, I believe Ghost has decided that you are not leaving yet. By sunrise, Clara had learned that Ghost considered every closed door a personal insult. The white wolf waited outside her guest room until she stepped into the corridor, then seized the edge of her herb pouch and carried it toward the eastern staircase. That belongs to me, Clara called, hurrying after him. Ghost glanced back with unmistakable satisfaction, but refused to stop. He led her through a sunlit gallery and into the castle garden, where Ethan stood beside a stone fountain speaking with Margaret Hayes, the royal physician. Ethan dismissed the waiting servants with a glance, then studied the pouch hanging from Ghost's mouth. I assume you did not give him permission to steal that. Your wolf appears to believe permission is optional. Clara held out her hand. Ghost placed the pouch at Ethan's feet instead. Traitor, she murmured. Ethan almost smiled as he returned it. He has ignored every command since you arrived. I am beginning to suspect he enjoys watching me lose authority. Margaret examined Ghost and confirmed that his breathing, appetite, and movement were perfectly normal. There was never anything physically wrong with him, Clara said. He pretended to need help because he wanted me inside the castle. That appears to be the only explanation, Margaret replied. Ethan folded his arms. Ghost has never brought a stranger here before. Clara noticed the question hidden beneath his statement. I cannot explain why he chose me. I treated him because I believed he was in distress. Anyone with compassion would have done the same. Many people have compassion when someone is watching, Ethan said. You entered the lake before you knew anyone would reward you. His words carried respect, but Clara refused to let royal approval determine her worth. I did what was necessary. That does not mean Ghost may arrange my future. She reminded Ethan that she had agreed to remain for only 3 days while Margaret observed the wolf. After that, Clara intended to return to her village and the patients depending on her. Ethan's expression tightened, but he nodded. The agreement stands. Ghost released a protesting whine and pushed his head beneath Clara's hand. She stroked his fur, but did not change her answer. Later that morning, Margaret invited Clara to inspect the castle infirmary. Clara discovered shelves filled with expensive medicines, but few remedies prepared for servants who suffered ordinary winter illnesses. She suggested creating less costly mixtures from local herbs, and Margaret listened with immediate interest. Ethan appeared in the doorway while Clara demonstrated how dried feverfew could be measured safely. He had come to summon Margaret to the council chamber, yet he remained until Clara finished. "You speak differently when you are working," he observed. "Because medicine is something I understand." "You confronted an alpha king beside a lake without hesitation." "That was also something I understood. You were preventing me from helping a wolf." Ethan laughed before he could stop himself, and the unexpected warmth changed his entire face. Clara found herself smiling in return. Ghost, watching from beneath the table, thumped his tail as if another part of his plan had succeeded. Their quiet moment ended when a servant entered with an invitation to the Royal Harvest Festival scheduled for the following evening. Ethan told Clara she was welcome to attend, but she declined until Margaret explained that healers from the northern villages would be present. "Then I will go for the medicines," Clara said. "Not the dancing." Ethan's eyes brightened. "Of course." From the corridor, a beautifully dressed woman named Lady Vanessa Caldwell watched Clara tuck a loose strand of brown hair behind her ear while Ethan carried her basket toward the garden. Vanessa had expected the village Omega to disappear before the festival. Instead, Ghost had chosen her. The royal physician respected her, and the Alpha King was looking at her as though the crowded castle had suddenly become too small for anyone else. By evening, Clara returned to her guest room and found a formal gown laid across the bed. Beside it rested a card bearing Ethan's seal and a single handwritten sentence. "Your work brought you here, so no one will ask you to pretend to be anything else." Clara touched the card, unaware that someone had already entered the room before her and removed one small bottle from her herb pouch. By the second morning of Clara's 3-day agreement, Ghost had already decided that simply keeping her near Ethan was not enough. He wanted them working together. Clara discovered this when a royal attendant rushed into the breakfast room and announced that Ethan's ceremonial crown had vanished minutes before a council meeting. Every servant began searching, but Ghost sat beside Clara's chair with a silver ribbon hanging from his mouth. "What did you do?" Clara asked. The wolf rose and led her to the herb room, where her basket rested on a wooden table. Buried beneath bundles of lavender and rosemary was the missing crown. Ethan entered just as Clara lifted it from the basket. His ice-blue eyes moved from the crown to Ghost, who looked remarkably pleased. "I promise I did not steal this," Clara said. "I believe you," Ethan replied. "You are not foolish enough to hide a royal crown in the first place everyone would search." That is comforting in a very specific way. A quiet laugh escaped him before he could stop it. Ghost wagged his tail, apparently satisfied with their progress. Later that afternoon, Clara went to the glass greenhouse to prepare a calming tonic for Margaret. Ethan arrived moments afterward, following a trail of muddy paw prints. The instant he stepped inside, Ghost pulled the door shut from outside and dropped the iron. "Latch into place." "Ghost," Ethan called, testing the handle. The wolf looked through the glass, sneezed, and trotted away. Clara tried not to smile. Does the Alpha King often get locked inside his own greenhouse? This is the first time. Then I am honored to witness history. While they waited for a gardener, Clara sorted herbs and asked why Ethan recognized so many plants. He explained that his mother had taught him their names when he was a boy, before royal duties filled every hour of his life. The authority in his voice softened as he spoke about her, and Clara saw something she had not expected, not a distant ruler, but a lonely son guarding warm memories behind a cold expression. When the door was finally opened, Ghost was waiting with Ethan's childhood scarf between his teeth. He carried it across the northern lawn and into a shallow cave hidden behind flowering vines. Inside, Clara found a wooden box containing carved animals, faded drawings, and letters tied with blue ribbon. Ethan stopped at the entrance. "No one has entered this place since my mother died," he said. Clara immediately stepped back. "Then I should leave." Ghost blocked her path. Ethan studied Clara's face, perhaps expecting curiosity or ambition, but she made no attempt to touch the box. "You may stay," he said at last. He knelt and lifted a small wooden wolf carved with uneven paws. "I made this for Ghost before I understood that real wolves do not appreciate wooden gifts." Clara smiled. "Did he pretend to like it?" "He buried it beneath my pillow." Their laughter filled the little cave, simple and unguarded. For the first time, Ethan spoke to her without measuring every word as a king. He told her how Ghost had remained beside him through years of duty and silence. Clara understood then that the wolf's mischief was not random. Ghost was trying to return something Ethan had lost long ago, the freedom to trust another person. As evening light reached the cave, Clara placed the carved wolf carefully beside the letters. Ethan's hand moved toward hers, then paused, giving her the choice. Clara closed the small distance and let their fingers touch. Outside, Ghost gave one triumphant bark before racing toward the castle. When they followed, they found him waiting beside the entrance to the crowded summer festival, with 2 invitation ribbons held proudly in his mouth. The summer festival filled Blackwood Castle's courtyard with golden lanterns, bright ribbons, music, and the warm scent of baked apples. Clara hesitated at the entrance, still holding the invitation ribbon Ghost had delivered. She had come to the castle as a healer for 3 days, not as a guest at a royal celebration. Ethan noticed her uncertainty and offered his arm without issuing a command. "You may leave whenever you wish," he said, "but I would be honored if you stayed." Clara looked into his ice-blue eyes, then gently placed her hand on his arm. Ghost trotted ahead of them, carrying his own ribbon like an important official. The crowd immediately noticed the Alpha King entering beside an unknown Omega. Whispers followed them through the courtyard, but Ethan never hurried Clara or released her hand. He introduced her to the musicians, the castle gardeners, and several village families whose children already knew Ghost. For the first time, Clara saw Ethan surrounded not by guards and council members, but by people who trusted him. He remembered the names of elderly villagers, asked children about their lessons, and quietly arranged a chair for a tired baker before anyone else noticed she needed one. The lonely man from the hidden cave was still there, but Clara could now see the kindness beneath his royal restraint. Ghost watched them closely until the musicians began a cheerful dance. Then he suddenly raced toward the decorative fountain at the center of the courtyard and jumped into its shallow pool. He paddled in one dramatic circle, rolled onto his back, and let out a pitiful whine. Several guests gasped. Clara folded her arms. "No," she called. Ghost gave another desperate whine and allowed one paw to sink beneath the water. "You already used that trick." The wolf floated closer to the fountain's edge and closed his eyes. Laughter spread through the crowd as everyone realized what he was doing. Ethan stepped beside Clara. "I believe he expects another rescue." "He expects another reward," she corrected. Ghost opened one amber eye. Clara pointed firmly toward dry ground. "There will be no second rescue kiss." Ghost climbed from the fountain, shook water over 2 startled guards, and walked straight to Clara with his head lowered in exaggerated sorrow. She scratched behind his ears but refused to kiss his forehead. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on her, softened by an emotion he could no longer hide. "I still remember it," he said quietly. Clara turned toward him. "Remember what?" "The moment beside the lake. You were cold, frightened, and surrounded by strangers, but your only concern was whether Ghost was safe." His voice lowered beneath the music. "No one had ever looked at anything belonging to me without seeing power, danger, or advantage first. You saw someone who needed kindness." Clara's playful smile faded into something more tender. "Why does my kissing your wolf matter so much to you?" Ethan glanced at Ghost, then back at her. "Because for one unreasonable moment, I wished I had been the one you were relieved to find safe." Clara's breath caught. The confession was simple, but it revealed more than any royal declaration could have. Ethan did not move closer. He waited, allowing her the same choice he had given her in the cave. Clara began to answer, but a sharp voice interrupted them. "Your Majesty, the council requires your immediate attention." Lady Vanessa Caldwell stood beneath the lanterns in an elegant silver dress, her expression cool as she studied Clara. 2 council members waited behind her, holding a small glass bottle and Clara's missing herb pouch. Vanessa raised the bottle for the gathering crowd to see. "A serious accusation has been made," she announced. "Someone claims Miss Bennet used a forbidden herbal mixture to control the royal wolf." Ghost stopped wagging his tail. Ethan's expression hardened, but Clara stepped forward before he could speak. She looked directly at Vanessa and held out her hand for the bottle. "Then let every herb be examined publicly," she said. "I will prove that Ghost chose to trust me without any potion, command, or deception." The festival courtyard fell silent as Clara accepted the glass bottle from Lady Vanessa. She removed the stopper, studied the pale green liquid, and held it beneath her nose without touching it. "This contains valerian, Chamomile, crushed silver leaf, and rosewater, she said. It is a calming mixture, but it did not come from my herb pouch. Vanessa lifted one eyebrow. Those ingredients are commonly used by village healers. Some are, Clara agreed. But I never use rosewater in medicine prepared for Ghost because it irritates his nose. I also carry no silver leaf. Ghost cautiously sniffed the bottle and sneezed, confirming her explanation. Ethan asked who had reported the supposed evidence. A council member explained that an unidentified festival servant had found the bottle in Clara's guest room beside her missing herb pouch. Clara requested that Margaret Hayes examine everything publicly. Ethan respected her decision and ordered a table brought beneath the lanterns. Clara emptied her pouch, revealing lavender, rosemary, mint, feverfew, and carefully labeled paper packets, but no silver leaf. Margaret inspected the bottle and confirmed Clara's findings. Clara then turned the glass toward the lantern light. It bears the mark of Caldwell Apothecary. Vanessa's expression tightened. My family supplies medicine throughout the kingdom. That proves nothing. By itself, it does not, Clara replied. But this bottle was filled recently. The rose oil remains fresh around the stopper, and whoever handled it wore a strong violet perfume. Ghost sniffed the cloth around the stopper and followed the scent through the eastern arcade. Instead of leading everyone to Vanessa's private cabinet, he entered the festival preparation room, where servants had arranged flowers, ribbons, and medicine for the guests. He stopped beside a discarded cloth stained with pale green liquid. Margaret found silver leaf dust on it, while Clara noticed a strand of silver thread caught along its edge. Vanessa wore a silver gown, but several attendants had similar ribbon on their uniforms, so the evidence still did not identify the person responsible. Ethan questioned the festival steward, who checked the duty ledger. Only 3 attendants had entered Clara's corridor that evening, and one had signed out a bottle of calming tonic from the preparation room. The attendant named in the ledger grew pale. At first, she insisted the medicine had been requested for an elderly guest. Margaret calmly produced the apothecary record, which showed no such request. Ethan then ordered the corridor servant brought forward. The servant recognized the attendant as the unidentified woman who had reported finding the bottle. Faced with the matching ledger entry, the stained cloth, and 2 witnesses, the attendant finally admitted the truth. Vanessa had instructed her to take Clara's pouch, place the tonic in the guest room, and make an anonymous accusation. Vanessa believed that separating Clara from Ghost would end Ethan's growing attachment before the council considered a common Omega as a possible royal companion. Ethan's voice remained controlled. Clara Bennett entered this castle because she showed compassion when she believed a living creature was in danger. She has requested no title, fortune, or privilege. This attempt to destroy her reputation will be examined formally. Vanessa was removed from the festival and ordered to appear before the council the following morning. Clara gathered her herbs without triumph and thanked Margaret for judging the evidence fairly. When the courtyard had emptied, Ethan approached her. You should never have been forced to defend yourself here. But you allowed me to speak, Clara replied. You did not silence everyone and declare me innocent simply because you are king. Your voice mattered more than my command. Sadness entered Clara's smile. Our 3-day agreement ends tomorrow. Ghost immediately placed both paws over her shoes. Ethan looked at her like a man who could command a kingdom, but could not command one honest heart to remain. Then tomorrow, I must give you a reason to stay that belongs to neither the crown nor Ghost. Before Clara could answer, Ghost seized her travel cloak from a nearby chair and vanished into the darkened castle with the one thing she needed to leave. Clara found her travel cloak the next morning folded outside her guest room, with Ghost lying across it like a final obstacle. You cannot hide everything that belongs to me, she told him gently. The white wolf rested his enormous head on her shoes and released a sorrowful sigh. Clara knelt and stroked the fur between his ears. I care about you, but staying because you refuse to let me leave would not be a real choice. Ghost opened his amber eyes as Ethan approached, dressed for the council meeting, but carrying none of his usual royal certainty. The carriage is ready whenever you are, he said. Clara searched his face. You are truly allowing me to go? I never wanted you to remain as my prisoner, my obligation, or Ghost's favorite possession. Ethan offered her the cloak. If you return, I want it to be because you chose to. Clara fastened it, thanked Margaret and the castle staff, then followed Ethan outside. Ghost remained on the steps, refusing to look at them. Clara had traveled less than half a mile along the lakeside road when a distant howl reached the carriage. Through the window, she saw a ghost racing across the northern field toward Blackwood Lake, with Ethan following on horseback. Something small and silver was drifting near the shore, carried rapidly toward deeper water. Ghost plunged in after it. "What is he chasing?" the driver asked. Clara recognized the silver ribbon tied around a faded wooden carving, one she had seen beside the portrait of Ethan's late mother. The keepsake must have fallen from Ghost's collar while he ran. He caught the ribbon between his teeth, but heavy rain in the northern hills had strengthened the current overnight. Within seconds, he was being pulled toward a fallen tree wedged between two rocks. Several guards near the shore hesitated, assuming Ghost was repeating one of his performances. Clara saw his desperate movements and ordered the carriage to stop. "Bring the rescue rope from beneath the driver's seat. Secure one end around that oak and keep everyone away from the unstable bank." Ethan reached a point farther downstream on the same shore and immediately understood her plan. Clara tied a broad loop into the rope while the guards formed an anchored line behind him. "Do not approach from directly upstream," she warned. "The current could drive both of you into the branches." Ethan moved several yards below the fallen tree and entered only to his waist. Clara watched the water rather than the frightened wolf. "Ghost, look at me," she called. His amber eyes found hers. "Release the carving and swim toward Ethan." Ghost refused to abandon the keepsake. Ethan extended one hand while holding the rope with the other. "Bring it to me," he called. Ghost turned with effort and drifted within reach. Ethan caught the handle of his collar, secured the rope around his chest, and took the carving from his mouth. The guards pulled them safely into the shallows. Clara hurried along the shoreline to them. Ghost buried his wet head against her chest while she examined his breathing. "You frightened everyone so many times that they did not recognize when you truly needed help," she whispered. "A dramatic wolf must use his performances wisely." Ghost gave a tired whine and licked her chin. Ethan wrapped his riding coat around Clara's shoulders, just as he had on the day they met. "You could have continued home," he said. "Choosing to leave does not mean choosing to stop caring," she replied. Ethan opened his hand, revealing the weathered carving. It portrayed his mother beside a much younger ghost. Margaret arrived and examined the wolf. As she adjusted his silver collar, she noticed that the decorative clasp had loosened. Beneath it was a narrow, concealed compartment. "Your Majesty, there is something inside." Ethan carefully opened the compartment and removed a tiny silver tube sealed with dark royal wax. The tube was tarnished but watertight, and his late mother's emblem remained visible on its cap. Ghost watched Clara as Ethan broke the seal and withdrew a tightly rolled letter preserved inside. His mother had written Clara's name nowhere, yet the first line described exactly the kind of person Ghost had been waiting nearly 15 years to find. Ethan read the preserved letter twice before speaking, while Clara, Margaret, and the guards waited beside the quiet lake. Ghost rested between Ethan and Clara, exhausted but safe, his wet white fur shining beneath the morning sun. The tiny silver tube lay open in Ethan's palm, its broken wax seal bearing the royal emblem of his late mother. Although the paper had remained tightly rolled inside the watertight container for nearly 15 years, the writing was still clear. "She wrote this shortly before she died," Ethan said. His voice remained steady, but Clara heard the emotion beneath it. Ethan began reading aloud. His mother explained that Ghost possessed an unusual ability to recognize the character people concealed behind manners, titles, and carefully chosen words. The white wolf might respect strength, but he would offer complete trust only to someone whose compassion was guided by courage and wisdom. That person would neither fear Ethan's crown nor worship his power. She would see the man beneath the title, challenge him when he was wrong, protect others without seeking praise, and remind him that love chosen freely was worth more than loyalty demanded through duty. The final passage made Ethan pause. "When Ghost finds such a heart, do not assume he has chosen your future for you. He can only open the door. You must become the man she would willingly meet on the other side." Clara looked at Ghost, remembering every dramatic trick that had kept her near the castle. "Perhaps that explains why you have worked so hard to bring us together." Ghost lifted his head and gave an innocent whine. Margaret smiled. Or perhaps he simply enjoys interfering in royal affairs. Ethan carefully returned the letter to its silver tube. My mother never told me about the hidden compartment. She must have trusted Ghost to reveal it when the right person appeared. His ice blue eyes met Clara's. He kept it safe for nearly 15 years. Clara's heart tightened, but she refused to allow an old letter to decide what neither of them had freely chosen. Your mother described a kind of person, she replied gently. She did not name me. I know. Ethan stepped closer but maintained a respectful distance. Ghost's trust does not create an obligation between us. The uncertainty in his face was more honest than any royal declaration. I love you, Clara. Not because my mother. Imagine someone like you might appear, and not because Ghost pulled you into my life. I love the woman who challenged a king over a stolen herb basket, insisted on defending her own honor, and organized a rescue while everyone else hesitated. I love your kindness, but I admire the strength guiding it even more. Clara could not answer immediately. She had watched Ethan command council chambers and silence crowded courtyards. Yet now he stood before her without using authority as a shield. I was afraid you might use the letter as another reason for me to stay, she admitted. I wanted to ask you, Ethan said. But if I use my mother's words or Ghost's affection to keep you here, then I have misunderstood them both. He offered Clara the letter so she could read it herself. Return to your village. Complete the responsibilities waiting for you. If you decide your path leads elsewhere, I will respect that choice. If you return, I will welcome you as an equal, never as a reward Ghost found for me. Clara read the final lines, rolled the letter carefully, and returned it to the protective silver tube. You have changed since the day we met beside this lake, she said. I am beginning to understand that being trusted is not the same as being obeyed, Ethan replied. Clara smiled as tears warmed her eyes. She held his hand long enough for him to understand that leaving was not rejection, kissed Ghost's forehead, and entered the waiting carriage. The white wolf started to follow, but Ethan gently called him back. This time, Ghost obeyed. As the carriage traveled toward the village, Clara looked through the rear window and saw Ethan standing beside Ghost, allowing her to leave without conditions. 3 days later, the royal council assembled to hear Ethan announce an important decision. Before he could begin, the chamber doors opened, and Clara entered carrying her herb basket, a written proposal, and a choice that belonged entirely to her. Every council member turned as Clara entered the chamber, but Ethan saw only the herb basket in her hands, the folded proposal beneath it, and the quiet certainty in her eyes. Ghost rose from beside the throne, raced across the marble floor, and stopped several feet from her. For once, he did not pull her forward or block the door behind her. He simply waited. Clara smiled and crossed the remaining distance herself. Ghost pressed his head against her side, then looked proudly at Ethan. Miss Bennet, Ethan said, standing before the council. I believed you had returned to your village. I did. Clara placed her basket on the council table. I spoke with my neighbors, completed my patient's medicines, and considered the future I wanted before anyone else could choose it for me. Ethan descended the steps, but stopped at a respectful distance. And what did you decide? Clara presented the document. Blackwood's northern villages have only one traveling physician. Families sometimes journey more than 30 miles for basic treatment. I propose establishing a healing center near the northern road, training local assistants, and providing medicine to families who cannot afford it. She had included projected costs, a list of available workers, supply estimates, and letters of support from 3 villages. Several council members leaned forward with interest. Clara explained that used royal land would reduce construction costs and that modest fees from wealthier patients could support charitable treatment. An older councilman studied the figures. Your plan could also reduce winter illness and allow the traveling physician to reach more distant settlements. That is the intention, Clara replied. Ethan looked at her rather than the proposal. Is that why you returned? It is one reason. I will not abandon my calling to become an ornament in a royal court. I need work that matters, a home where my voice is respected, and the freedom to disagree with the Alpha King when he deserves it. A few council members appeared startled. Ethan smiled. That final condition appears unavoidable. Clara stepped closer. I also returned because I love you. Not your title, not the future described in your mother's letter, and certainly not the trouble created by your dramatic wolf. I love the man who allowed me to leave even when it frightened him, because he understood that love without choice is another kind of cage. Ethan's careful composure gave way to open relief. Then I accept every condition. You have not heard all of them. There are more. Ghost is forbidden from pretending to drown, stealing royal property, locking people inside greenhouses, or hiding my travel cloak. Ghost lowered his head. Ethan regarded him solemnly. Those terms may be more difficult to enforce than the entire village proposal. Laughter moved through the chamber. Ethan placed Clara's document before the council and withdrew from the discussion so his personal feelings would not influence their decision. The council questioned Clara about staffing, winter access, medicine supplies, and financial oversight. She answered every concern clearly. After reviewing the evidence and projected benefits, they approved a 1-year trial because the plan was practical, affordable, and urgently needed. Ethan then granted the unused land under terms protecting Clara's independent authority over the center. When the meeting ended, he led her into the sunlit castle garden. Ghost followed, pretending not to listen. Ethan took Clara's hands. I cannot promise that life beside me will always be simple. I would be suspicious if it were. But I promise your choices will remain your own. Your work will be honored, and I will never mistake obedience for love again. Clara looked into his ice-blue eyes. Then I choose to stay. Ethan embraced her gently, and Ghost immediately pushed between them. 6 months later, the Blackwood Healing House opened beside the northern road. Clara treated villagers, trained 2 assistants, and published transparent accounts proving the center could support itself. Ethan regularly delivered supplies, while Ghost became its beloved unofficial guardian. On the morning Ethan and Clara exchanged their vows beneath flowering vines, Ghost behaved perfectly until the final blessing. Then he jumped into the garden fountain, rolled onto his back, and released the most theatrical wine in the kingdom. Clara folded her arms as every guest laughed. Do not even think about it, she warned. Ghost opened one amber eye. Ethan leaned closer and whispered, perhaps he only needs an introduction. Clara kissed Ethan's cheek instead, and Ghost sprang from the fountain, wagging his tail as though that had been his plan all along.